What's up, big fellas? Welcome to the Fig Bellas, where we got the thick fellas. I guess this is episode 4, returning from the void, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or are we still in the void?
I think this is technically episode 3, right?
No.
Episode 3 continuation. Episode 4.
Episode 3 part 2.
Right.
Episode 3.3. Episode 3.4.
Next episode. The next
Kingdom Hearts episode 3.4.
Remix.
Final remaster.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Bro,
Yeah.
drop the chips. Alright.
Yeah, please.
Anyways,
Drop your chips.
we lost another. We lost a fella in the void, but it's okay. He's doing something.
Money moves.
We're talking about Bo.
But we still got my boy Marvin, Caleb, Alia, and Abraham, of course. And
Wow, talking to yourself in the third person, I see.
yes, he is here. It is me. He is here. And we should continue our discussion on mediocrity in modern art. I feel like the last discussion kind of went off of what I was envisioning it, but I guess let's get it back on the tracks.
Yeah.
And all right, so let's go back to the overall topic. All right, we're talking about mediocrity. First of all, how do you feel about mediocrity?
Like in general,
Because
because I know I have like a strong opinion about mediocre things in like film in general, but also like I know last time we were talking about anime in general.
It's just media in general.
Okay, yeah, like it's so I mean like the whole deal of like our landscape now with media is there's so much of it, right?
Yeah.
It's because there's so much of it when we find like the average thing, and we're watching a ton of average things over and over again. It gets kind of like we're actually just like wasting time while watching things now, and so we're always looking for like the big different stuff that pops out of nowhere. And so I know like especially for film because that's what I'm gonna focus on is that average movies like I hate. Now it's like I've seen it before. It's not different. Rarely is there like a gem. Or really, average movies, they turn into... Average movies are, to me, like the new bad movies. Because bad movies now I can at least kind of enjoy and laugh at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's my thing. I'm trying to think of examples, but I'll come back to that later.
If you're gonna be bad, at least be good at it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely think with different forms of media flooding every media space, like Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, it becomes a certain norm of just having something being mediocre, and I definitely think that's not something we should get to a level of accepting, because if you just have mediocre art, then you have the whole saying of life mimics art, or art mimics life. So what is our life going to be if all the art or media that we're consuming is just crap?
Yeah. Marvin?
I think it goes into more like a psychological thing, like the humans, like infatuation with like the extremes, because you never see someone being famous for being, just average or something like that. They're famous for either just being really, really like a really good person, or they're just outlandish, like like Kanye or something like that. They're just saying like a bunch of like controversial stuff, or they're just known as like a really bad person. So I mean, yeah, that's like kind of spilled over into our consumption of media, and how we want something that's just out there. Yeah, piggybacking off of like what Caleb said, we want different things. So yeah, that was my thought.
Okay. Well, I feel like one thing that has kind of been driving me to want to have this conversation is because how I've seen a lot more nowadays. I've seen mediocre art get more of a spotlight, or mediocre media, if you want to call it that, get more and more spotlight, just because I feel like now that we're being flooded with a lot more mediocre media, that allows us to get used to it so that we're getting conditioned to accept it as the new norm.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot more now, or I guess in general, I feel like we more readily accept or praise or just fail to criticize something for not being as out there as it could be, or not putting forth as much effort as many of his predecessors or colleagues can do. And it's upsetting to also see works from different artists or works from different groups of people who do put forth the effort to put themselves out there and make something that is very deeply personal and very expressive and put so much effort into what they do, not have that be as put as much on the spotlight as many other mediocre works.
And it gets kind of undercut by like the mainstream and like all the general content. Yeah, it gets undercut by the mainstream and other media content. And so, yeah, I was gonna say, like, you know, all this, like, I was thinking from a different angle of like the producers of this content too. You know, how hard it is to make original content now. You know, most things that we deem quote unquote original isn't really, but it's like the same thing that we've seen before with like a unique kind of twist on it, you know. And so I was thinking, like, of all the people producing more and more things, you know, how hard is it on them to make new things? And maybe because of that struggle, it's just easier for them because they have to make a living too, you know.
Yeah.
To just like put out, you know, mediocre basic content so they can get by. So, you know, not just from a consumer perspective, but like the dilemma from a producing perspective as well.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it kind of is kind of a shift. You know, my friend who I love him to death, but like his views on anime, we don't really align.
It'd be like that.
Yeah. So like his idea of like a top tier anime is like Naruto Shippuden, Sword Art Online, One Punch Man season 2, which I was just kind of.
Oh boy.
I was kind of hurt.
Most of you should be coming from the last episode where you should know my view on that.
Yikes. Yeah. So I mean, a big part of it is he's not really been exposed to like a broad amount of anime. You know, he's only ever seen like the stuff that is popular just like in the mainstream. You know, like One Punch Man and Naruto and stuff like that. So it's going back to what you said about, you know, the people who are putting out like these passion projects and everything kind of getting undercut by these really just popular forms of media. And it's a shame to see, honestly.
Yeah. So what do you feel like this leads us? Like where does this all where's the end game with this? Where all this media that's kind of been oversaturated and just mediocre in general, what happens from now on? Do we have another big inspiration that
Renaissance?
Yeah, are we approaching the new media renaissance? Because I feel like right now the renaissance was this new online frontier of like
streaming
access. Yeah.
I feel like that depends on what a general society is in need of and is looking for, because things that happened in past art renaissances, that's not something we look at now and be like, oh, well, that's amazing. Like, yeah, we can appreciate it for what it meant then, but it doesn't mean as much to us now. So what really is mediocrity? Is it like plain and subjective, or not subjective, objective, or is it subjective based on the time, based on what you're looking for, based on what you need? Like, who really gets to say that?
Yeah.
Also, are we talking about the literal content or the volume of content? Because both, I think, have changed a lot recently. But I guess they are tied. Yeah. So, like, I know one thing, like, the whole thing about, there's been in the film world, a big debate between the value of streaming content. For example, like for a long time, the Academy, honestly, I still think it's a thing now. They're on whether or not the Academy should like, I guess, what's it called? Consider like content made on streaming services like Netflix. But I guess that's been kind of resolved because they picked Roma last year, which is this foreign film in Mexico, as what they picked that as a nomination for, I believe, Best Picture, but also won Best Foreign Film last year. So, but before that, there's been like some serious strides. Like, you know, I remember Steven Spielberg said that like things made on Netflix should not be considered for like, you know, Academy, you know, nominations and stuff. Then there's a whole thing with the latest Martin Scorsese film, The Irishman. It's like this 3-hour film will be coming on Netflix and not in theaters. And so it's just kind of a question of like where is content shifting now? And just because it's on a streaming device, just because it's not in theaters, is it somehow, you know, lessen value of what it's meant to be, you know?
Yeah. I feel like, oh, were you about to say?
I was gonna say, I feel like the older generation's always gonna have some kind of pushback with stuff like this, like what you were saying with Steven Spielberg, Quentin Tarantino coming out and saying he hates like the concept of Netflix, like in general. So I mean, this is always gonna happen whenever you have like a transition or whatever. You know, there's gonna be some form of pushback, but I feel like eventually this is just gonna become the norm. You know. And then we're eventually gonna get like the quality content that people say that we had before that we don't have now, and it's just like a matter of time.
Yeah. Every generation complains about the next one.
Honestly.
But I feel like we did touch on some good points, because how do we come up with what we can value as mediocre, and that definitely determines what we look for going forward. So I feel like we should go into that more and talk about how we value objectivity, and I guess, yeah, how we value objectivity and how do we determine that, and what does that even mean? So, yeah, what the hell is objectivity?
So, like, I mean, typically, you know, something that is objective is something that's apparent, right? It's like a fact, basically, right? It's like, I guess, or maybe the better word is universally accepted or common knowledge. And like in film, technically everything in film is subjective. But however, you know, you get popular trends and general consensus, and suddenly that subjective feeling becomes objective. And then you'll find that the one person who watches a certain thing, who disagrees with the majority, gets kind of outed. And then you cause a little conflict there, and you see little internet wars, the keyboard warriors and things.
Yeah.
Twitter. I'm pretty much in the same boat as you. I feel like the concept of objectivity has some subjectivity to it as well. People like there are legitimate people who believe that, you know, the critic's view or like the professional view of something is the objective view of it. That's the only way it can be viewed. You know, the Academy, movie reviewers, stuff like that. And then, you know, the objective truth can be, you know, just what you see on Rotten Tomatoes, you know, the audience score. I don't know. So, I don't know. It's a dicey subject, you know? And I can't really think of one clear-cut answer that I would have for it.
I definitely think of objectivity as a concept without emotion. Like, you're not supposed to be putting your feelings into something or saying, oh, I like this, or I don't like that, or I just think that such and such media, like such and such movie is just a bad movie. Well, what makes it bad? Why are you saying it's bad? Are you, like, what purpose do you think the movie was trying to achieve? Is that different from, like, the director's purpose? Like, it matters on how you look at it, which is subjective.
Yeah.
But, I think there are like certain things that are commonly agreed on, like what is good acting, like what is the purpose of acting. It's to evoke emotion. It's to make you believe that this is true, believe that this is happening, believe that that person that you see in however many movies is actually going through this as this character. And if they don't convince you of that, then maybe that's bad acting. If they do convince you of that, maybe that's good, and it depends.
Maybe the good acting is how bad the acting
Oh, we're approaching the crossing points between the voids. But yeah, I feel like I've definitely, myself, I've gone through like a shift in how I view objectivity, because I feel like before I felt like objective opinion, that statement in itself is fucking stupid. The objective opinion was if you could qualify certain values towards your opinion. So I guess it's like how Alia said, talking about, okay, if you say something is bad, what about it was bad? And so putting certain qualities towards my statement that this is bad. But like going back and self-reflecting on that, saying that certain qualities are good and bad objectively is in itself subjective. And so my opinion is that these qualities kind of are the rubric for an objective score. And so placing that objective opinion might be different for someone else's rubric for that objective score. So I guess Marvin and I got in a pretty nice argument about this earlier this year. We were talking about animation and how you can qualify animation as either good or bad. And I said that the qualities that you could apply to animation to say that it is good is expressivity? Is that the word?
Expressiveness?
Sure, that. Expressiveness and attention to detail. And that was broad enough to capture the idea of what I valued the most in animation, while being able to play towards multiple different genres and styles and influences of what is most commonly accepted as good animation.
Yeah.
But
I see.
But choosing those variables in itself is subjective to me and what I view as this is good. But you can't, maybe someone is a lot more strict than me and say, oh no, if it did this or this and that, that's bad or that's good. And maybe someone else says, if it moves, it's good. So
yeah, I guess that comes into, I guess, why people in general have moved to this concept of consensus, right?
yeah.
The overall, opinion, when people have done this for a certain amount of time, there are standards, right, that are set. And those standards are what people use the line of their objectivity. But that's abused to the point to where people who disagree with that are somehow immediately counted as wrong, per se, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the line that I guess where the real conflict is setting in.
Yeah. Maybe we're mixing different concepts with our linguistics, because I hear a lot of us saying objectivity and bringing up the words good and bad, which are inherently subjective.
Right.
So maybe if anybody were to look at a piece of media and say, well, like take a Marvel movie or something like that, is it not necessarily a good or a bad comic book movie, but is this the correct way, I guess, to adapt a comic book movie? Does it hit all the marks that it was trying to make in that arc, and not necessarily like, oh well, like I think the actor was like the character or something like that.
Yeah, but that's I was gonna say that's the thing. You have to, in order to define something as good or bad, I feel like you can't apply that objectively. You
That's
have
what I'm
to.
saying. I'm saying
yeah.
like good or bad versus correct or incorrect.
Yeah, in order to say good or bad, you have to first apply the framework that you're looking at it in. Right. So you have to first like define your rubric and say, by this rubric, then it is good. By this rubric, rubric, then it is bad. So just saying good or bad itself doesn't really get you anywhere.
Right.
And applying that to say objective good, objective bad also doesn't get you anywhere, even if you do use a rubric, because then it also sets the standard that your rubric is the only rubric,
Right.
Yeah.
and any other person's rubric or their values or their opinion is less important than yours.
Right. I think a good example of that being displayed has probably been like the Star Wars and Star Wars fandom over the past couple of years.
Oh boy.
Mhm.
Oh
More
boy.
specifically, yes, I am talking about The Last Jedi because that was kind of the push off of all this thing, right?
Are we gonna somehow put in Star Wars in this
Right.
episode again?
I'm gonna make it short and concise. But basically, you know, Star Wars had a rubric. There's actually a really good video by Chris Stuckman out there called The Star Wars Formula, or I would check that out, where it basically says that even the prequels...
Oh man, you just put me on.
even the prequels and the originals follow similar formulas, even though they feel different. Yeah, with this new sequel trilogy, and when basically, you know... Well, okay, that video points out that there's a rubric, like as you were saying. There is a certain things happen, this is a flow, and this is what we expect, what Star Wars is. And then, in The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson Twix the rubric. You know, Tweaks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely shredded that.
Twix.
And so, and even though there are technically, I can see some similarities in The Last Jedi compared to some other stuff. The stuff that he decides to tweaks is what really started or the fandom, you know, we're twisting the rubric too much, you know, and so that really comes in back to that topic of objectivity, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really good because it follows the rubric, or maybe is twisting the rubric a good thing, you know, or a bad thing? And so I think that's what's been I think that's the root cause of, like, you know, why everyone's at each other's throats or word for at a time. But I think hopefully episode 9 will bring us back together. We'll see.
Yeah.
Probably not. But
Probably not. But
Probably not.
maybe like a good Band-Aid, you know? It's like it's still a scar there, but...
The force is already divided. Do we want to talk about that movie? I feel like we can go off on a little tangent.
The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
we can go around and say like what
General
our thoughts of
opinions
it.
first? Yeah.
I'm not going first.
It's all you, Abe.
Oh, okay. Wow, this is new.
Yeah.
Let me first start out say that I paid full price to see it twice.
Mhm.
So that should say something.
I saw it twice.
Yeah.
But like, was it like, because like, was it good or was it confusing? Because I know a lot of people went twice because they were confused after the first
Oh
time.
no, I loved it.
Okay.
Okay. I feel like initial taste of the food was better than like once it settled in,
Okay.
but I still feel like it was a good meal.
Okay. Like when you get Taco Bell, but you know.
That's terrible.
Oh, objective bad.
You could have said anything else.
You really could.
I thought it was something, you know, something that's good in the moment, but then, you know, you get rid of it and it's kind of and then you think back and it's like, you know, I go again. You know?
No.
Put in X restaurant. The analogy still applies.
Popeyes.
Maybe, yeah, probably. But yeah,
Never got the damn sandwich.
yeah, it was.
That's a whole other topic. That's a whole other topic.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
bro, that's a-
I'm sorry if we
that's
brought up
so-
food.
Fighting.
But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. I do think some parts could have been shaped up, especially with Finn's arc
Oh my
in the
God,
movie.
yes.
I feel like that definitely could have used the work. It could have used the workings. But I feel like Rey's story was what really drew me in. But there were definitely plot contrivances that I can see looking back at it, that's why I say it was better the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
But then now looking back at it, it's like, you didn't have to do that and stuff like that. But I definitely think there were a lot of some of the best cinematic shots in the series so far.
Gosh, yes.
I mean, Ray and Kylo fighting, in the big ship, the big ship, and also the light speed kamikaze.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my goodness. No matter how many times I see that scene, it's so incredible.
The theater lost its shit, dude.
Oh, they did that absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I love the crate. The crate was really nice.
Yeah.
The salty planet, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes. The idea of like having it's just such a nice aesthetic, like a nice aesthetic choice that, and it was like so creative too.
Yeah.
Especially how they used like the ships like dragging on the ground and just like spraying red dust everywhere across like this white ground, and it's just such a striking visual, and especially brings the film together with like the red tones.
Yeah.
And it's like a very hard contrast.
Yeah.
And the fight with Luke's hologram with Kylo was like, it was just really cool. That's all I have to say. Kylo's arc during the film was also really interesting.
An underdog in that movie, if I'm being honest. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Adam Driver's a king. Personally. That's my Kylo. I love that man.
Swallow.
The memes that came out of that movie were kind of, regardless of what your thoughts on the actual movie was, the memes that came after were just godly.
I mean, it doesn't. I feel like Infinity War and Endgame have like stolen the meme crown.
Oh, yeah.
The meme crown.
Oh yeah.
So it's hard for me to look back at it, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's my gush on it.
I'm gonna be honest. I've never cared for anything Star Wars. I've seen every single movie a billion times. I have all of them at my house. I hate them. I hate them. They're so. Objectively. Like, to me, because I've seen them so many times and I've seen them as a kid, I've had every chance to see everything that's great about them and everything that's terrible about them. And it just seems. It's not a story that I can relate to, even though I love space and that's what I want my whole career to be about. It's just not something that I can relate to. It's not a fantasy that I find very grounding. In terms of Last Jedi, I agree Finn's character, a lot more should have been done with his character. It was very lacking from the first trailer that I saw with him included ever. I thought he was going to be very important. I was very excited to see that there was like some tinge of diversity under all of those like white clone suits or whatever. So that was nice to see. That was interesting. But he just wasn't a character after a while. And whoever Oscar Isaac played, who? Poe. Okay, Poe.
Yes.
Just seemed rather forgettable and kind of aggravating with his actions in The Last Jedi. I don't understand why he did what he did. It seemed on brand for him, but he didn't turn out to be right, so it wasn't worth it. And I've seen all of them so many times. Is that scene? That's the one with the scene with Leia just coming back to the ship.
Yeah.
Mary Poppins ass trick. I didn't appreciate that. I can talk about what I didn't appreciate for days, but what I did appreciate, I can also talk about for days. Was Kylo Ren's story arc. I agree that was good and well done, and he was a bit of an underdog. Luke is extra as hell. I love that like last battle. I didn't enjoy watching him drink green milk, but that's that.
Mark Hamill didn't
either. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't. But
it's like, what is this meant?
where it ended up was like a good ending point for that movie. I'm not all that excited to see the next movie. I've never been that excited to see any of them. But the trailer, as always, looks nice.
That's true.
So,
every single Star Wars trailer has the episode ones. They all look good. Like honestly, all of them except for like that one solo trailer. Since like post Disney, they've all looked good.
Yeah.
I will say. Yeah. So, Last Jedi. So I happened to go see it in a screening like a couple days before it dropped, via connections. And so,
oh, he's got mafia connections.
well, it's not that interesting. And it was I was elated because I am a really really big Star Wars fan, and I tried to clear my expectations when watching the movie, and when I was just floored the entire time in a good way. I didn't really know what to think of the movie, so much so I like decided when the credits rolled, like I'm going to watch this again on Monday because no one would be there. And so I actually did, and then I went and spent my money and it contributed to the box office, and then watched it again. And I will say that the more and more I think about it now, this isn't a movie that like, out of all the Star Wars movies, like I'm probably not going to watch this one as often as the others for some reason. Like maybe that's just a sequel thing because like I've only seen The Force Awakens like twice maybe, and this one I don't think I'm gonna watch that often for some reason, and I'm still dissecting what that part is. But in terms of what Rian Johnson did, the new stuff that he added, the because usually when I look at a Star Wars film, there's like two sides. You have the Force stuff with the main protagonist and like the mastery figure, and then you have like the Rebel stuff, basically what everyone else is doing. And I think in this movie, he got one of them really good. All the Force stuff, everything with Luke, Rey, Kylo, Snoke, I loved. And he went off the rails with it. And honestly, the stuff that he went off the rails with, I digged. But the whole Rebel part, which was just there for the sake of plot, did not work. And I recognize that even in my first two times, but the more and more I think about it, and because the more and more it is integral, you can't get rid of it. Like them going to Finn and Rose going to Canto Bight, that's integral to the plot. Even if it like leads up to nothing, because they find the guy and then the guy betrays them.
The
later.
thief turns out to be a thief.
Yeah, yeah.
I was so annoyed.
So it's like that's a whole hour of this movie for naught, and it's not like they learn anything. Like Finn's character is like the same as he was in Force Awakens.
Exactly.
Like he abandons the First Order and he doesn't really know what to do with himself. He's about to abandon the Resistance.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what to do with himself. All he cares about is Rey. Where's Rey? Where's Rey? I gotta find Rey. I gotta rescue Rey.
She's
blah,
not
blah,
thinking
blah.
about him at all. And
Honestly.
I'm like, shut up.
And then, but at the same time, though, like if they were to make like a romance with Finn, I'd see Rey over freaking Rose, because like I don't see like, you know, that actress got some trash for her part.
Yeah. She didn't deserve
she
the
did
trash
not.
she got.
Yeah.
The character and the character writing is what deserved the trash,
Exactly.
not the actress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so Rose just didn't do it for me. I cringed both times when I saw the kiss scene. And I know many people were, agreed. Like many people actually liked the fact that Finn, like when he was going to sacrifice himself, I'm like, no, dude, that's like a waste of a character who basically did nothing for 2 movies, you know? So like, I mean, it's just kind of like I didn't feel any completeness in him, and maybe because that he is a black dude, that he is, this stormtrooper with a face that I do invest into him,
Yeah.
and so I care about what they do with him, and so I just didn't think that he got the respect that he deserves.
Yeah, I feel
like as a character in general.
Yeah.
I feel like him about to sacrifice himself was so important to some people because that was his only progress since The Force Awakens.
Right.
Yeah.
So right when he's about to make progress, slaps him right in the face.
Yeah.
And he's back to square one with nothing since 2 movies now.
Yeah.
So
Ugh.
I guess
Come on, Jake.
it would have, the sacrifice would have been better than what we got.
Yeah,
Definitely.
That's true.
But it didn't have to only be a sacrifice.
Exactly. Maybe because I don't. Okay. Yeah. I don't mind characters sacrificing themselves, but if that's the only thing they did for character progression, then they wouldn't rub well with me.
Yeah.
So that's probably why I was kind of iffy about it.
And I feel like you can trace that back to Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
Like Solo, he sacrificed himself, kinda. I mean, he got captured at the end of that, but that wasn't his only character trait
Exactly.
for
It's been growing for 2 movies.
Yeah, and you can't really replicate that.
My feelings for Finn is summed
yeah.
up in that noise.
like looking at Rose and Finn's kiss versus Leia and Solo's kiss. It's like, what are you doing?
Exactly. I will say, because I need my boy Marvin to say something.
Yeah.
But
I know Marvin. He's
Yeah.
twitching in his seat over there.
Got all the receipts.
I will say that, like, my last, like, I do love what they did with Luke in this movie.
What was that?
I love what they did with Luke in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I think he had a better conclusion in this than he did in 6. Because at the end of 6, it became more focused on Anakin when he killed the Emperor. But in this one, it actually was his finale specifically. So I like that a lot. But yeah, all right, Marvin, let me hear you.
Okay, so this movie, this movie kind of changed my perception of like the series as a whole. Because okay, I walked out of the theater, right, immediately on the Twitter. I typed it real quick. I was like, the Last Jedi was bad, my guy, and then I just went on a whole rant about that shit. And then I went and saw it again 2 days later, and I backtracked on literally everything that I said. I was like, holy crap, Rian Johnson's like actually a pretty competent director, and you know, a lot of the shots, the character progression, everything about it, you know, I learned to appreciate it a bit more. And then I mellowed out. You know, I went through the
roller coaster.
Yeah, the whole roller coaster of emotions. And you know, I looked at the movie and then I looked at the series as a whole, and then I watched like some video by Cosmonaut Variety Hour where he was like, you know, as much of a fan as I am of Star Wars, they're all kind of bad. And I was just like, I kind of see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
You know, like the thing about Star Wars.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that later.
Yeah. So like the thing about Star Wars movies, right, is like they all feature some form of bad writing. You know, like some dumbass, like obligatory dumb Star Wars shit.
That's so.
And you know, like Star Wars fans, we love to make excuses for like whatever movie we herald as like the top tier Star Wars movie. You know, like as much as I love Episode 5, it's got some dumb shit in it. You know, and you know, it's be it like the fight choreography, the writing, just like the way scenes are directed. We love to make excuses for things, and so I would, for the longest time, I was making excuses for The Last Jedi, completely ignoring like the obvious flaws, like how Finn's character was handled, the whole thing, the whole romance section with Rose, how the Resistance story was handled, and I was just making excuses for it. And I was just like, you know, it was okay, you know, it was an okay Star Wars movie. So that's my thoughts on it. My opinion is just kind of mellowed out a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like going back over like they're all kind of bad in some way. Like I love Episode 3, but I know there's some dumb lines in that, and I love them because they're so dumb. And the fight choreography is so like over the top, and I love it. It's got dumb shit in it. I love it. Even the originals, they have like, okay, we can go in Star Wars, like Star Wars Episode 4, the Star Wars movie.
Yes, Star Wars.
That I mean, they kind of leave out a lot concerning to the characters, which is why the prequels I feel like are necessary, especially because at the beginning they just have an objective, good and bad, and then they just play off of that, say, okay, you have to care about us because we're good and they're bad.
Yeah.
But I do feel like they do a good job at like portraying their flexing their power to oppress us, and the kind of ideas going into that, like we're the resistance, you have to fight for the resistance, save the galaxy, whatever, blah blah blah. You're the chosen one. That's kind of at this point is kind of a played out trope, but I feel like at the time it wasn't like that bad.
I mean, even back then, I think it was. It's just it was in space.
Yeah.
Therefore, it was new.
Yeah, that I feel like that's the thing. I feel like the biggest thing with Star Wars for Star Wars Episode 4 was like how inventive it was about the environment that it played the movie in. So it kind of like blew everyone away, and it was definitely an essential film to filmography itself, and I do appreciate a lot of things about it. I just feel like they, like even at the end with Luke automatically just like, oh, I can do this even though I've had no training with ships.
People look at Rey sometimes and they're like, you know, she's too powerful and blah blah blah. She's a Mary Sue.
I mean, Luke destroyed the. I mean, it only took him 2 runs, but I mean, yeah. So that was that. That's why I appreciate the logical setup that the prequels gave towards Anakin's character, without being like, oh, he's bad, but yeah, and it actually I feel like that qualifies his redemption in Episode 6 a bit more.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Funny how you mentioned like the setup and not the execution.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Yeah. Objective bad.
Misa don't like that.
Dude, the guy, bro. I feel so bad for the guy who plays him, right?
Hey, at least you don't see his face in the movie.
He can go out here anonymous.
Yeah.
That character had to be CGI.
All right, let's back to objectivity. Yeah. Huh. I guess we spoke a lot about how we feel about how objectivity plays into the way we judge media. So from there, we can start talking about how we feel about I guess in this new environment that we have, like critics, we have, I guess, more official critics, the ones who get time on TV to talk about stuff, but we also have like critics on YouTube, or even your average Joe on Twitter.
In this room.
Yeah, us.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about how judging things objectively is subjective, what value can we place in the words that critics have?
I tend to place a lot of value in experience. Like, I value your opinion a lot because I know you've seen a ton more anime than I have. Right?
Oh, why? Thank you.
So whenever you recommend something to me, or you mention like how you feel about something, I take a lot of stock into it because I know you've seen enough of that medium that you can give a fairly educated opinion on it. And of course, we're always going to disagree on stuff, but I always take a lot of stock in what you say. So that's just how I view a lot of the reviews I see on the internet and stuff like that. I have to know that the person knows what they're talking about in a way. So that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah. I understand that, and I feel like having that amount of experience is good. I feel like that probably is definitely essential, especially if you're reaching a large audience of people. But it's also essential for you to be able to place a certain framework around how you're judging what you're judging. But I also feel like, for me at least, I also, when I look to reviews or reviewers, I like to see why certain people place whatever values they have around a work and judge how I place my values around the work. So, let's see. I watch some like some anime YouTubers, and I don't as much anymore, like watch reviews for stuff, but I do like to watch analysis videos just because I like to make sure that when I'm watching, am I seeing the same things that other people are saying? Or maybe, oh, I didn't notice that before. Let me go back and watch that and try to appreciate something new from it. Or maybe, no, I don't agree with their ideas at all. What are they talking about? I don't want to watch this person anymore.
Unsubscribe.
But yeah, I feel like that's necessary for me to see ideas that I both agree with and don't agree with, just so that I can reframe my own perception on what I see as good.
Right.
Yeah.
But then I also feel like the more subjective I get with media, the less I tend to look at reviews, and I look more to like analyzing the techniques behind it. So I guess a good example for that would be I watch some like music theory on YouTube, and I'm not too educated in a lot of music theory, so that's why I go to it, and I like to learn more about the structure behind songs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if I go to like a page like Fantano, I mean, he's definitely educated and experienced, and he shows that with the way he gives his reviews and stuff. It's just that I feel like I can form my own opinion on what I listen to based on what I know about music and based on what I know about what I like in music, so that I don't place that much of value in what a lot of people say about music. So, or what they like, what music they like. So, I place more value in what the artist puts into the music, and maybe the lyrics behind it, and just stuff like that, analyzing it rather than saying I liked it, I didn't, you know?
Yeah,
Or
it's
like giving it scores, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you can apply that. I'll just keep going off your music analogy. You know, there's a total difference between appreciating something you're listening to. Say you go to a concert, like an orchestra concert, and you're listening to that band or something perform, and then you're, say, performing in an orchestra yourself. Totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like, well, let me even separate even more. Say like listening to an orchestra, and then listening to it while also having, like, you've played an orchestra before, you know, like, you know what's going on. You have that insider look to it.
Yeah.
And so I think how, you know, we can better what like really differentiates critics and casuals about any form of media is, you know, learning the hows. Because when you learn what's going into what's going on, when you're learning what, like, you do X and Y and Z, and it like creates that, and you see how they're able to do that, you're able to, you know, look at it in a higher, you know, level of appreciation. And so that's what, you know, I think that's how we're able to create this semi-illusion of objectivity, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I totally see what you're saying, and I think that's, yeah, you can apply it to a ton of different stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the main thing. I feel like that's my biggest purpose that I would give to critics, is their ability to inform people who haven't been as experienced in that medium. Be able to give them the insight that they have as to why they think the way they do. And so I feel like that's the job for critics to have. Not as much to say they like something or they don't, but to explain
Like why.
what makes them think the way they do about something.
I agree. What Caleb brought up, you know, about like actually knowing how to, like, you know, play like an instrument or something like that, and listen to something when you know the process to it. It's something I thought about a lot, like, because those that don't know, I'm like going to school to be a game dev, right? And so it annoys me a lot when I go to Twitter or something, where you see like a bunch of people that have never like coded in their lives at all, and they like complain to developers like, why can't you do so and so and so and so, like, you know, just why can't you just code that in real quick or whatever? And they don't really understand the process that goes into it, you know. And something that's always irked me is, yes, I believe that everybody should have an opinion on something, but when you're straight up like expecting unrealistic expectations like out of somebody who makes like some kind of media, it just kind of irks me a lot, you know?
Yeah.
Such an ignorance factor.
Yeah, and I feel like critics have to be that bridge between the creator and the consumer.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, they have to think in kind of the same mind space that these creators have in order to appreciate and reach where the creator is coming from. But at the same time, they have to package it in a way that it can apply to the consumers, so that they're able to understand what they're talking about and be able to like reshape how they're thinking about it in the way they make decisions about consuming media.
Right. So say like, for instance, we're going through the scenario, and this is another film analogy, of like the Rotten Tomatoes where the critics bash on this film, yet everyone loves it.
Yeah.
So like, how do we take that, you know, like, and I'm just really curious, like, your thoughts, because I'm thinking like, because if a critic, you know, is looking at something, and this is quote unquote objectively bad in how it was handled, but if it was the purpose of the creator,
Yeah.
then like, you know, how do we deal with that? Like, as a person who's about to watch said movie, who do we choose? Do we go with everyone else? What is our end game, I guess, you know?
I think it matters depending on your taste to a
Okay.
certain extent, because not every critic who's critiquing somebody is going to be a fan of that person.
Yeah.
So their tastes just might like be completely misaligned. But people who are aligned with that taste, like, obviously they would go with it. So I think it really depends, because critics at the end of the day are human. They're not going to be as objective as everybody wants them to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it really relies heavily on taste.
And that's the thing. You can execute something the way you want it to be executed, but if it's not reaching the right person, then it's not going to receive the attention that you want it to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
exactly
boy.
what I was thinking. The critics bashed the hell out of his most recent comic skit, but almost all of his fans love it, and it's amazing. The rating that he got was so disproportionate to the actual like fan rating that it was like, what's going on here? Like, it's crazy. It's almost completely like different.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the tomato score. It was like a 0% to 100%.
Exactly.
How do you like? I don't understand how you critically like watch Chappelle. Like, I mean, honestly, but even from a critical perspective, like, because I listen to another podcast and you're like a ton of stand-up people in there, and like they were talking about the different techniques that this guy uses, and when I started looking at his show, I'm like, that's pretty genius. Not a lot of people can talk about what he's talking about and like pull it off.
And pull it off.
And not,
In his most recent specials, he almost completely abandoned like political correctness to a certain extent, but he did it in a way that was still very palatable to a lot of his fans that he left after he left the Chappelle show. So it's very interesting to see him come back and reform himself and reform his skills. He wasn't doing like nothing in that break. We can tell he was doing a lot, and it really shows.
Yeah, and I have the tomato meter pulled up right now. It's at a 31% from the critic score with a total of 16 reviews. 99% on the audience score with 35,000 reviews.
Like, seriously. Seriously.
It's very telling at a time.
Something's happening.
Something's amiss.
It's sabotage, obviously.
Great unbalance in the force.
Cords.
Oh God, don't.
That
I guess that almost wraps up our discussion on this. I guess the final idea about all of this is, what should the fans do in terms of how they consume media?
Educate yourself.
I've always been taught to look at any form of media that you're ingesting through a filter. You can't just like let it enter your brain and occupy it and be like, oh, that was really cool or whatever. Because if you do that, like, everything's cool to a certain extent. You can find, and that's where mediocrity comes in. You can find something good in the worst of things. But I think it's good to have your own rubric or a set of things that you're going in expecting or wanting from the media that you consume. What purpose do you have with what you're doing? And then go from there.
I believe, exposing yourself to as many different viewpoints as possible, and not putting yourself into an echo chamber. That's the biggest thing I've noticed. Even with a lot of reviewers that I agree with, there's going to be like that one movie or that one game that we're going to disagree on.
Yeah.
And, and especially today, where like things are mad expensive, you can't just like go out and buy things on a whim to see if you like it or not.
Yeah.
You got to be able to see a bunch of different viewpoints and see if it's actually something you would enjoy.
Also, like, maybe, especially, once again, I'm looking at movies again. What I do now is, like, I'll watch the movie first, and then I'll watch the review after.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, the playing with expectations can be pretty influential, before you witness it. So, before you watch John's, watch the movie. I'm just saying. I love him. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's what I feel like for me. I usually like watch the first trailer of something and I like don't watch anything else, because or if the first trailer hooks me, I try not to watch anything else, like no reviews, no more like trailers, no behind the scenes or any of that until I actually see it, and then I go back and watch it.
We should make that another topic. Trailers have been changing recently.
Oh
Yes.
Oh yeah. Put that in the void log.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing that I do, but I also feel like I like to go into understanding how things are created, or like what the mind of the creator behind the work is another important thing that I feel like is underappreciated by most consumers. They just go into something like, oh, it flashed, it's good.
Context is everything.
Yeah. Wow. I think that is mission complete.
Ooh.
Yeah. What's some of your favorite openings?
Oh, anime openings?
Yeah, let's go.
Oh god.
I mean,
20 minutes.
I mean, season 2, my hero, like the first half. I can't. I love it. Honestly, but it's more of the song.
Oh, peace sign? Yeah.
Yeah, peace sign.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh wait, I was thinking of season 3. My dumbass.
The first opening in season 3?
Yeah, I was like, Odd Future ? But yeah.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
My bad. Obviously, I don't. Favorite openings? Oh, goodness. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, opening 1.
Oh.
Go.
Oh, go.
Hard, bro.
Go. That was not it at all. I'm sorry.
Amazing, though. Absolutely amazing. That's all I can think of.
I think, I'm caught. Alright, I'm gonna just say it. I'm not that caught, but I'm kind of caught.
Oh boy.
So, my favorite is obviously Cruel Angel's Thesis. But it's at a tough point with Violet Evergarden's opening.
Ooh.
I found that to be beautiful, especially the animation that went along with it.
The animation at any point in the show.
At any point in the show, but the choreography of the animation for the opening was like spot on. It came from like each episode sequentially, and it went along with the emotions of the song as it progressed.
Yeah.
And I thought that was beautiful. My favorite ending is the Violet Evergarden ending. That's why I didn't want to say Violet Evergarden for like everything.
Aw.
But yeah.
Objective good.
I don't know.
Whenever it's good or bad, just put adjective on top of it. That's
Yes.
it.
Everything Elliot says is good.
Let's see. Favorite opening? It's hard for me to say. I know one of my favorites. I have more favorite endings than favorite openings, which is weird.
Wow.
But one of my favorite openings is Bloody Stream for JoJo Part 2. Amazing. Amazing. No, I haven't gotten through Part 5 yet. I'm sorry, guys. I'm probably gonna get crucified for saying that. Anyways,
I ain't got to
my
part one, dog.
my favorite ending is, I've never heard anybody else talk about this ending, but my favorite ending is Little Witch Academia ending 2. It's so good. It's so... You've seen it?
I'm not.
Oh my
I
god.
need to.
You've
been recommending this to me for a while.
It's so good. It uses this really fluid and very minimalist animation, but it's able to morph between a lot of different colors and shapes and things. But the whole animation takes us through Akko's entire character arc so seamlessly and so metaphorically, it delivers on all of the emotional peaks of the show that I haven't seen that executed in any other way in any other ending. That I love it so much, and the song is a whole ass bop.
Man, I didn't say my favorite ending, dog. I gotta say Into the Spider-Verse ending.
Oh wait. Now I gotta reshape. Favorite opening. All right, let's do this one last time.
Dude, I don't have any favorite endings because I usually don't watch endings for anime. I just kind of skip to the next episode.
Wow.
I mean, it's because I'm just really hyped to get to the next episode, so I'm like, I'll skip this. But and even
Netflix boy.
Yeah.
No, I have not watched a single anime on Netflix.
So you skipped it manually?
Yeah. For openings, maybe I'll watch because usually I binge something, so I'll watch the first if it's the first episode, I'll watch the opening for that, or the first time my first section. Well, anytime I do a session, the first episode I'll watch that opening title, and after that it's marathon, and then when I'm done.
Abraham, I'm surprised you didn't bring up Mob Psycho opening 1 or 2.
Mob Psycho.
Oh my god.
I was gonna
oh
bring
my
that
god.
up and Shamar
Oh my
Shampoo.
god. Okay, fuck JoJo. Mob Psycho. Opening 2 of Mob Psycho is something else. It is something else. But yes, Mob Psycho ending 1 is very close behind Little Witch Academia. The only reason I don't have Mob Psycho ending 1 as my favorite is because it doesn't have the same impactful character writing that ending 2 of Little Witch Academia does. But both of them have very, very visually appealing qualities. But Mob Psycho goes over the top with this ridiculously difficult and niche style of animation, while Little Witch Academia is also very refined. It's just it's digital animation, so I feel like I can't put as much credit to it as painting oil paintings and animating that. I'm oh my god, Miyasato, what are you doing? But yeah, those two are great, really great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Mob Psycho opening 2.
I love me some Tank. I will say that. Every time, every time I have to watch it. That is one time I don't skip. So. Yeah.
All right, it's time to blow this scene.
Promise
3,
Neverland
2,
opening
1,
is also
let's
pretty
jam.
cool.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Promise Neverland.
It goes sicko mode for no reason.
Yeah, I really didn't think I was gonna like it at first, but it's highly addictive.
Yeah.
What about Unravel?
Goodness. I don't remember the actual opening. I just remember the song. I haven't watched Tokyo Ghoul in so long, dude.
Yeah, I feel like Unravel was overhyped. I liked opening 2 better, even though it was very, very, very much backlash when I remember it being released. But the song it's so unconventional, and it plays it goes through so many different time signature changes and different key changes. It's technically it's very original. I feel like it's more original than Unravel.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I had that random anime background wallpaper thing, and as soon as I opened a tab, Unravel popped up.
It knows. All right, we gotta leave the void before they start coming after us.
Oof. They're already behind me. It's fine.
Oh my god.
Who's they? Yes.
Oh. Oh boy.
I don't think so good.
I think.
I don't think so.
What?
It's so good.
It's already getting to us. Oh no.
We're already
Mr.
Mark.
That's fine. I think next week we will be out of the void and back into the main timeline. So, awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you like, subscribe, comment, and be sure to look out for more Fig Bellows content. Oh, God.
Fig
All
Bellows
right.
continent.
Thank you. Love you all. See ya.